some point I will
Start
just
recording.
start recording, and then we can
Yeah.
talk about what's ever going on. And at some point, we will realize that we arrived in our Q&A session because we've already reached 5,000 subscribers or followers on YouTube.
Yeah, an incredible number.
Yes,
It's been a few years since we started, and it's lovely to get here.
absolutely. It's crazy, as you said. Like, you think about it, back then when we started, and that's already one of the first questions, how our journey looked like. Mm, I've met Samuel in 2018.
Yeah.
That's when you moved to Darmstadt, right?
Yep.
And beforehand, I was not, like, barely getting in contact with Dual Commander, I would say. I don't know, when was it when you were introduced to Highlander?
Oh, that was a couple of years before that. The European Highlander format is a pretty old one. I think since the dawn of Magic, players have been looking for different ways to play Magic, and yeah, so I have in the Mannheim started playing in Germany. There are a lot of players that have been playing for a very long time, and Highlander was a favorite format there, and I kind of started my Singleton journey with Highlander there, and when I moved to Darmstadt, I had already kind of stopped playing Highlander and started basically just playing EDH, the normal commander, and then I met Felix at a game store and saw what they were playing and thought, "Ooh, this looks interesting. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at this format."
Yeah.
And I started. You were already quite a bit deeper into the format than I was,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if you had. Did you have all the duels when I
Not
started
yet,
playing? I
but
think no.
no, not yet. But the way I figured that you're a bit more serious into it was because we had our vendor with who we are still organizing today's events in Germany, and he had his own store back then. And you were coming inside for the first time, and we were sitting there at the FNM and playing, and I realized there was like some guy in the back, which was you, asking just like, I want to buy this tool, this tool, this tool. Do you have it in stock? Yeah, of course you can have it. And you were just buying them. I was like, okay, this guy is on a serious one, like, because usually because usually people don't just randomly walk in and buy a couple of dual lens for 1,000 euros. So I was like, okay, yeah, but I think he's
Yeah,
serious about the format, so why not?
I think that was I think the order is a little bit different because I when I started playing Commander, normal EDH, I never saw a reason to fork out the cash to buy dual lands because you could just get shock lands and didn't have that much difference to your life total. But then I looked at dual commander and I was like, well, okay, if I'm gonna start playing this with my first dual commander deck, which was Anima, I threw the pile together. I think I net decked a little bit, and then I was like, well, this is a very creature-centric commander, and these lists that I'm seeing are not playing enough creatures, so I have to play more creatures. I cut a lot of spells and played a lot more creatures. And then I was like, okay, well, this is if I'm playing against a burn deck or anything like that, the 2 damage does matter. So I was like, okay, well, I'll start with a tiger, and then I think a couple of weeks later, I was like, okay, well, I got to get the rest as well. So I think the first set of duels that I did have um, was Trop, Volk, and Tiger, and then I started building other decks and eventually got the other duels as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, I think I remember back then because I also started with Highlander in 2010, roughly. Like, my very first set that I drafted was Magic 10 2010. And back then it was like gimme Magic basically, and it's never a good idea to start with Magic by drafting because drafting is one of the most complex formats in Magic overall. Um, so I saw European Highlander played in our store, and I was interested in the concept of Singleton. And I started with banned mid range, but I couldn't afford the dual lands and all the expensive cards. And back then, if you have like a budget of 50 euros per month, buying a scavenging ooze for 20 euros is like 40% of that. So you think
Yeah.
twice about whether or not
Yeah.
you get that card. And it was kind of crazy. So I was playing those tournaments, those little FNMs, and people were basically smashing me because I had to pay 3 life to search for my land, while my opponent has to pay only 1 life to search for the land. So, yeah. And then at some point, I think I stopped playing it and I sold all my cards. And then I got back like my now wife, back then girlfriend, that, and I know like we had like some discussion about, oh, there was this game Magic. It was so cool. I love it so much. I kind of miss playing it. And she was like, "Yeah, well, why don't you step back into the store and see if there are some people playing with you?" And that's what I did. And then I found a cool multiplayer group with which I started Commander, and that's how I was introduced into Commander. And eventually, I was like, I was always the guy in the pot building the most powerful decks. I thought they were cool and okay, but others were like, "Ah, it's not fun." And at some point, I figured maybe it's time for me to switch to 1v1,
Yeah.
a 1v1 format overall. And then there were like two guys. I think it was Hao and David. And Hao, you've seen 1 or 2 times on the channel already. Those guys were playing Dual Commander, something that I didn't know about back then. And it was like 30 HP, but they're playing against each other. This looks cool. This looks to be an evolution of Highlander, maybe. And they had like some fancy high costing cards in the command zone, and it was its own ban list and whatsoever. And I had a look into it. And then my very first deck was Grand Arbiter, the Azorius 4-drop that decreases the cost for your white and blue spells. And that was an interesting journey overall. And then at some point, we were a bit more motivated. At that point, Samuel was not yet with the community. And then we had some agreements with the store owner. We said, well, there's this format, it looks cool, and then let's have some FNMs, maybe play that. And we did that. And then there was this big change to 20 HP when I think lots of people moved to other formats, and like where things like Leviathan were also created, and Centurion and whatsoever. Um, yeah, and then we started to get more and more players, like also from the multiplayer base. People had a look at it and it looked cool to them. And I think that's when I had like my very first serious deck, which was Leovold. So I was a lot into Sulta, and that's also when we changed places um, to Mitya's LGS and played there. And that's when you got into the community too. And Martin was with us already. He was playing Kess all the time. He was very much
Oh, I
into,
remember that.
yeah, he was a lot
That was
into
a scary
control.
matchup.
It was. I loved playing Leovold against him. We're one of those very grindy matchups, like lots of back and forth. Sultai mid range against Grix's hard control. I loved it. Like we were sitting there 2 hours having a best of three. No one cares about it. Like learning the basics of Magic was super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it started. And then help me out. The LGS at some point had to close, right? Because Meteor was changing like the contractor.
Yeah, we had some. We switched locations for a couple of reasons, and ended up at the limo lounge.
Yeah. So
And
limo, for all the non-German speakers, limo is lemonade.
Yeah,
And
there were a place. A guy kind of opened a store for different kinds of specialty lemonades. Who was a Magic player himself, and who kind of pitched the idea of having people play there on game nights, which is a kind of a great business move, is to just get people into your store for an evening, buy a couple of lemonades when you have a lot of people there, and if you can kind of fill a couple of niches, get a couple of clubs coming, and if they like the place, then eventually people are going to end up there and play there, which is yeah, and that worked really well for a time. And then
I remember it was
we
a really cool store. They also had this
yeah
GameCube evenings where people played like Mario Kart tournaments and stuff, and
yeah, and
it was always
our local Quidditch club met there for
yeah,
anyone who
exactly.
knows what that is, and that's also where we started recording for the channel. So if you scroll back
Yeah,
to
true.
the very first videos that we were posting, that was in the basement of that store
Yeah.
during COVID. Was it before COVID
No,
or at the
it
beginning of
was
COVID?
before COVID. It was
Okay,
in the year, yeah, before COVID.
okay,
Um, but 2019 to be fair.
yeah.
And
But we were playing there. We were recording there when COVID started, right?
yeah,
If I
exactly.
remember correctly.
And later on we switched to my apartment because there were like the sound was not really nice, and then also like the owner of the lounge changed, and the new owner was kind of weird, and we had some problems with him. He wasn't as chilled as the last guy. The last guy had
Yeah, we had a
the
couple of times where we were there to record, and he had to open the door for us, and he just wasn't there,
yeah,
and we stood outside the place for like half an hour or to an hour.
yeah, that
These kind
was
of things happened,
not really cool.
and
That's true.
that that just kind of stops. It doesn't really motivate us to keep staying there. We have to find a different location, and we ended up at Felix's place.
Yeah, but
So
do you know, like the initial motivation to do the channel was because I remember back then, like we had this gang of 3 to 4 guys with you, Martin, Simon back then. He also played in the beginning on the channel, and me, and we were motivated to try out things in the format, brewing a lot with partners back then.
yeah, that was
And
kind of the niche that we were trying to occupy. We kind of realized pretty early on that the grind potential of having two commanders in the command zone was very strong, and there was some aspects that the ban list didn't really consider yet. And we were like, okay, we can make this happen somehow. And um, the that was also my my switch from the Animar deck was okay. Well, I have these duels, and there's this kind of potential in the Teamer color pool,
oh yeah,
and Felix and I built a deck together that is, I think it's the first video on the channel, right?
yeah,
The Teamer aggro
against Urza.
pile that we built, and yeah, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, it was also the first time we both went to a tournament together in Prague. It's the first time where we met those guys in a very cool venue. But originally, like one thing I don't want to miss out on is, I was while we were experimenting with a couple of partner variations, I was very much into Tymna Thrasios back then, but not like the usual Alluran combo pile you would play back then, rather a toolboxy mid-rangey pile. And at some point, I think it was Team Chronicles. On their channel, I've seen some tournament coverage of a French tournament. I think it was Demonic Tournament or something like this back then, or Angelic Tournament, something like this. And I thought, okay, maybe there is some content on the internet at which I can see and learn how like how the Tymna Thrasios deck, the combo version, looks like, and also maybe I can learn how to play it and like like just get some more information about it. And there was none. There was I think there was this series from this big tournament, and that's it. I thought like, why don't we just try to do that? Why don't we come up with some videos and then people, we can introduce people to the format and by just playing decks, and we will also along the way we can learn different strategies and archetypes and stuff, and maybe it will motivate more people to start with the format. And I think it did overall. We can say that. Mm, but it was quite interesting back then. Like the initial motivation, I would have not thought that we 6 years later we would still stand here together and continue this project. But it was a very nice and fun journey so far, and I hope we will continue it for many more years.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. I was always like, well, this is a way to play Magic and to have fun with the game that's that goes beyond these FNMs that we have and going to tournaments and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's some kind of
And
it's a very meaningful way in some way because in this case, so a big thanks to everyone who's supporting this project, but it also feels like we can give something back because at some point we always have these people coming to us like, hey, you introduced me to it. It's such a nice format, and here I learned this and there I learned that, and it's super entertaining. There's even maybe, I don't know if you're still amongst us. There's one viewer, I think, who told us that he's listening as a podcast to our gameplays while he's doing sports. So he's not even watching. To him, it was just important because we always explained like what was going on, and he said like, yeah, he's just listening to it because he thinks it's like a nice entertainment during sports, which is crazy if you think about it. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. But
yeah,
yeah,
there's lots of ways to enjoy
that's right.
the
Yeah.
stuff we do. And there have been some very cool milestones. So what our kind of ramble just now was a pretty long ramble answering a first the first question posed to us, and the one that we wanted to answer first, and that was about our first DC deck and how our DC journey started. And the next question is asking us about our biggest milestones on the channel. And for me, that is kind of a little bit more removed from the channel itself because I take part in our videos, but I'm not that involved on the YouTube side. So for me, the biggest milestones was going to a French tournament, and my opponent, we exchange our first couple of words, and then my opponent kind of looks at me and says, "I know your voice." That's a very weird feeling, but also a cool feeling because you meet someone and they've at least seen a couple of the videos to have memorized the voice, which is really cool feeling when you meet someone and they're like, "Oh, I know who you are,"
Yeah, it is indeed.
which hasn't happened to me much in life yet. There are the times when you meet someone that you met on the internet over like a voice chat or something, where you see them for the first time and you recognize who they are by their voice and by the things that you know about them. But in this case, it's like a one-sided thing. I don't know I'd never knew that person before, but they knew who I was because of the YouTube channel, and
Yeah.
that's a very cool experience.
Yeah, it is indeed. It's always it's sometimes also a bit funny. I just had it the last weekend where when I was recording the member focus with Tifa, and then like one opponent started to explain to me, not realizing that I'm Bitzelberg, but they were explaining to me that Bitzelberg was last time recording something somewhere, and if I have seen it, and I was like, yeah, I have seen it because I was probably the one playing. It's always a bit funny, but it's a cool way indeed. Mm, I would say in terms of numbers, back then I was very hyped when we reached the first 1,000 subscribers because a friend of mine always said, imagine, like, of course, it's just a number that you see on the screen, but imagine it's like sitting in a hall and there are like 1,000 people paying attention to you and what you're doing. Obviously, that's not how it works on YouTube, but still 1,000 people are interested in what you're doing, and that's quite a lot of people, I would say. And then, of course, now the 5,000 are also incredible, but I think the 1,000s were different because then also
Yeah.
like you can partake in the YouTube partner program and stuff, and it's like it's a huge step for the channel itself. So it was definitely a big one for me, I would say.
Yeah, I think like 1,000 is still a number that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like the school that I used to go to, I think there was like 500 people that went to that school.
Hmm.
So if I think about like double the amount of people that were in our whole school assemblies, that's probably about 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And you see a stadium and they say there's 20,000 people in the stadium, but even that is like you're at a scale if you have a picture of that whole thing where you can't even make out individual people anymore. And like 5,000, 5 times 1,000, it's a it's a concept that when you're thinking about numbers is very easy to imagine. But if you think that like every person behind that number clicked on the subscribe button at some point,
Mm.
and a few thousand of those come back to watch our videos once a week and twice a week, and yeah, that's a incredible scale to think about.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking about whether or not there are more things that strike me in the same way, but I think not. I mean, the more people join, the more abstract it becomes, as you said. That's for sure. Mm, what I really enjoy and what makes me happy is to see all over again that there are like, there are some names that were there from the beginning, and that those guys or girls, uh, they're still watching. Like you still read those names 6 years later, still supporting us. That makes me happy all over again.
Yeah,
That's really cool to see day by day. Let's talk about our favorite cards in the 99 from the last years. To
a very cool question.
Yeah,
We
I
did
think so
quite a bit
too.
of thinking about answering this question, and we came up with a couple of categories. I still have a couple that I want to mention that are outside of this category, but I think Felix can start us off this time
With which one? Which one should
with
I start us off?
whichever order you want to go.
Which order I want to go? Okay, I will start with my all-time favorite, which you should probably know based on our dual commander journey. We've gone through the dual commander journey almost. Yeah, I say we.
I'm pretty sure I know the card. You want me to take a guess?
Yeah, take a guess. Take a guess.
I think it's called a Court of Calling.
Oh, that's close. That's close.
Oh,
That
okay,
was my
okay.
second. That was my second guess, or like my second card actually. It's a good one because back then I was playing a lot of toolbox decks, and I think whenever I played green, I almost always included some Court of Calling. And there was this, I know, like in the LGS, there was this saying like, okay, when I play the Court of Calling, you never know what's coming because I included some weird toolbox deck creatures that do something in this very situation. I
Yep.
think I had some absurd lineups with with
I
that
remember
card.
you playing a Plague Mare against me at some point and me picking the card up and being like, "What the fuck does
Yeah,
this thing do?"
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had some. I had some very weird things going on with this card. I think, yeah, I'm not going into detail. I have like tons of stories. We can do like a separate podcast on cool chord lines that I brought up at some point. But the card I was thinking about is actually Birthing Pot
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
because it synergizes well with the archetype that I like the most. Combo toolbox whatsoever. Played a lot of pot decks back then in various colors, and also because, as most of you know by now, my very first set that I fell in love with was Zenica, and Euphorexia was part of that block. So I have like a very different connection to the card, and I was really happy to make use of it all over again. How about you? What's your all-time favorite?
I have New Phyrexia is not part of the Zendikar block, but it's very close in era.
Sorry, that's true. That's
But
true. It's
the
in my
release dates are
brain,
very close to each
in
other.
my
Yeah,
brain,
I understand.
it's yeah.
It's a time where we had these um, a beautiful foiling process. The kind of the art style was very new Magic the Gathering for that time, and yeah, I totally get it.
Worldwide was actually part of the block. But yeah,
Yeah,
to me,
Zendikar and Worldwake.
it's like just a time frame, which I
Yeah,
all the sets in this time frame I combine to one thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, for me, my all-time favorite card. I'm not sure. I haven't actually played it on the channel that much, but for anyone who in the kind of podcast stuff that we've done so far, and when I've talked about ban list cards and things like that, um, I've definitely mentioned the card a lot. It's Balance. Sadly, now banned,
Mm.
but Balance is probably the card that I have enjoyed casting the most in the format, and whenever I had the ability to play a powerful balance deck, I usually went for it. So my first, I would say, really successful brew of my own that in like for me is very was a very successful brew was Akiri Thrasios,
Yes.
and balance was kind of the mainstay, the most important card in that deck I played. I played Muddle the Mixtures to transmute for balance. It went kind of that far, and yeah, Muddle Balance is an incredible card, and I loved I've loved casting that card whenever I could.
I still think that was one of the coolest decks you ever played, and I think if you look back in time, it was the one that you enjoyed the most, maybe, or
Yeah, yeah,
amongst the ones that
yeah.
you enjoyed the
I'm
most.
having a lot of fun to kind of allude to the next question, but I'm having a lot of fun with the deck I'm playing right now. Um,
Don't spoiler.
and I won't spoil,
Okay.
but yeah. Okay, so I think the next category let's go with the strongest. So we both have a card that kind of like goes in the so the question is about recent cards in the 99. Um, and this leans towards that. For me, the my most favorite card that is also probably one of the strongest cards that makes it into a lot of the 99s that I play is Metamorphosis Fanatic. I
Okay.
think
Okay.
that card has such incredible lineups, especially with Worldly Tutor. It's
Yeah.
incredible in the decks, in the black decks that get to put two big, like the black blue and black blue white reanimation decks that get to put two lifelink threats onto the play, into play, kind of incidentally with the Metamorphosis Fanatic, but it's also like the most powerful lines are in decks like Slimefoot, where you get to evoke a Fury, kill the opponent's board, and a turn later, Worldly Tutor for a Fanatic, and evoke the and put the Fury into play again with the Fanatic, have lifelink 4 damage and kill the opponent's board again, or evoke a Grief and do the same thing. These kind of lines. Um, They're super fun to resolve. They're not very risky, and sometimes you even just worldy tutor without anything in the graveyard for a 4/4 life, um, which is also pretty strong.
I agree. And I just wanted to add one thing. It's not only the strongest card, but also like a strong card with an interesting design. And Fnatic is definitely a strong card with an interesting
Yeah,
design because, we haven't seen a impactful miracle card for quite some time. There were some decks back then with temporal, not manipulation. Is it manipulation? The 2/1?
temporal manipulation is the card, right? Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. But apart from that, there weren't that many. There is this newer one, the white 5-drop that is played every now and then in white decks. But apart from that,
Yep.
I definitely agree. Fnatic is cool. By the way, guys, you can let us know what do you think is the strongest card with an interesting design. So the card I've chosen, some people might say it's not too interesting, but I actually think that fourth Eolingas is such a cool card. Um, the very first time I saw that, and that goes a bit into my the part of my brain that thinks about toolboxing again, is I was sending the card to Samuel and I said like I can I can load infinite devoted druid mana into that and I can find it with Spellseeker. That was like my first thought when I saw the card. And I think we see it in all the decks these days that feature Boros because it's super powerful. And I just like the aspect of it's never a dead card, like and towards the end of a game, it wins you the game just by using your mana. And I just think it's absolutely crazy. I love it. I love to play it.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's a bit too powerful, but that's a that's a different argument.
That's for a different
Yeah,
day. Mm,
especially like I mean, it's totally fits into the strongest card. I think the design is not that interesting.
okay.
I think it's interesting that you have to hit with it, but the
The
factor of hitting with it kind of goes away in terms of interest when it's an X spell. So you're never going to cast it when it's not guaranteed that you will hit with it.
Yeah, but there are
Yeah,
also situations in which, and I've had these situations in Aragon or other decks where you play it for two just to get the Monarch early on. Um, and that's what you see in Legacy from time to time, or back then when the card was played in Legacy.
the
Yeah.
card's still played in Legacy.
Okay. I'm not
Yeah,
into Legacy currently, but I'm not having a good overview over the metagame.
yeah.
Let's talk about a funky card. What's on your funky list?
The card I have in my funky slot is Flicker, which is a bit of a spoiler for the next question. Well, actually, not really. So Flicker was a card that kind of came on my radar when it was played in Dihada as an infinite a card that goes infinite with Underworld Breach and Dihada on in play. And now it's a card that I've considered every now and then to play in my decks and thought, no, that not the right deck. The synergies are there. And currently I'm playing a deck where I get to test it out again, and it's an old card. It's a card that a lot of players have never seen before,
Mm,
and suddenly you have the spell that does exactly what you're looking for in some situations.
that's true. I like the card too. And before Ihada was printed, I didn't even know it exists, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I always love playing cards that are name givers for a certain ability.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So Flicker, the name Flicker is what it does to a permanent is still called.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
right. That's the origin for that. For my part, I think my card is also very funky, and it goes back to the time when I built and played Ivy. It's Slip Out the Back. That's the blue face out protection spell from Streets of Capenna. And the reason why I like this card is because I like the concept of facing out. I think it's very powerful. We see that with Talon Gates these days, how powerful facing out is. It's not a good card to be used in an offensive way, but it's a very, very good card in defensive way. And I just have like cool memories back then when, Ivy was copying the spell, and then you have like two of your threats faced out to save them from a board wipe from your opponent. And I don't know, then I was playing Malcolm for some time where you also played the card, and now it's coming back with Vivi. I just think it's design wise, it's a cool card. And
Yep.
also like the name, whether it's in English or in German. In German, it's Durch die Hintertür, also quite funny. Of course, I have it in Japanese, so I cannot read it. But I just like the card.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you have
Okay.
do you have a
Hmm?
favorite do you have a favorite ability or something?
Overall,
Yeah,
not
overall.
really. I think I drafted the new Edge of Eternity format recently,
Hmm.
and I really like the warp mechanic. I think it's a very cool mechanic, also for future cards
Yeah.
to have that they experimented with. I think the design space is very cool. There's some very interesting effects that kind of synergize with it. Something maybe that isn't in our format as much, but like there's I've seen a couple of birthing ritual warp
Hmm.
decks in modern, and the deck that I'm playing currently also gets to abuse that a little bit, and in decks like Felia getting to add warp. And yeah, the warp mechanic was pretty cool, but overall I don't think I have a favorite mechanic. Landfall is obviously, um I love playing lands. I've played a lot of lands decks, and landfall is obviously a mechanic that fits very well into those strategies, and I've played a lot of it.
Okay,
But I wouldn't say it's like my
you guessed mine. That's exactly what I was going for. So because I was thinking about a card that was recently, more or less recently printed, that has this ability, and it's not Tifa. Tifa is like too young, and it's for me Tifa is just a commander card. But if I think about a card with landfall that impacted the format, I would say it's Brizzly, because I tried to do something with Brizzly in a similar way as Tifa is doing today. Just that Brizzly was not as successful, obviously. But then there were the Naru decks, including Brizzly for some combo lines, and now it's also part of Tifa, and it's getting more and more involved. And I just love Landfall. But the very original card I always think about is Lotus Cobra, which is unfortunately not included that much anymore. Back then, it was incredibly powerful to cheat two additional mana with a fetch land, and having like on turn two playing your Cobra in addition to the 3-drop that without the Cobra, like you could have still played it without a Cobra, but next turn with another fetch land or land, you have like a guaranteed 5-drop or
yeah.
two whatever drops. Mm. And also
And I
like
mean,
then it
Lotus
was
Cobra is still a very strong card. I think the ceiling has gotten higher,
yeah,
and cards like Bowmaster have definitely impacted her playability, I would say.
that's true.
Um, just the fact that, the Lotus Cobra probably isn't going to survive to the turn afterwards,
Mm.
and then you sometimes, still. Actually, no. If you untap with a Lotus Cobra and a fetch line, you're bound to be doing something very powerful. But yeah,
Yeah,
I love
it-
Lotus Cobra too.
it's just a
Incredible card and
beautiful
such a
card.
fun card to play.
It's one of those few cards that I would actually frame and hang it on the wall,
Yeah,
because it's Chippy did some really good work on the artwork, like on the original one. It's just a beautiful card. Um,
absolutely.
how about, do you have one more thing I thought about? Like maybe a commander that you recently played, and we play a lot of cards, obviously due to the channel, and but also like for tournaments and stuff, that brought back nostalgia.
Absolutely. I have the perfect candidate, and a lot of the people who are watching will have seen me playing this commander. It was Loot the Pathfinder.
Ah, I knew it. I knew it. I
Um,
knew it.
it's such a cool commander and such a cool deck list as well because I got to play cards that I haven't been able to put in decks for a very long time. Things like Jace the Mind Sculptor and Cryptic Command, and also playing cards like the Bounce Lands. These are they used to not be playable because of Wasteland,
True.
and then afterwards there's a lot of control decks, a lot of tight mana requirements that don't allow you to play them, and Loot being able to build a deck that was like, okay, I can take advantage of extra land drops by drawing cards with Loot. Playing an early Loot is usually very good, so I could lean into that ability on Loot. Therefore, I got to play the bounce lands because I could find timings to play them, and yeah, a lot of nostalgia in that deck, which got to include a lot of cards that don't make it into the more orthodox tempo lists that we are playing a lot more of now.
Yeah, that's true. Like the mid-range pool for most color combinations is set these days. If you have a look at the current Grixis decks, for example, or anything that features red and black, you see all the goifs that are set, and you have a specific card pool for the blue cards and whatsoever. And it's
Yeah,
the command zones are different, but like the 99 looks very similar in terms of what it does, what it can, and that's definitely not the case for loot. I think the
yeah,
most nostalgic card out of loot to me was Wilderness Reclamation. I think you played it, or did I?
yes, yeah,
Yes,
I
I
did,
think
I
right.
did.
Um, it's I'm not even sure. I think Wilderness Reclamation goes back to the time where we played not Genesis Storm, but another deck. Mm,
We had a partner control deck that used used Thrasios and
wasn't it Tymna?
there was Tumna and there was a Kraum version as well.
Right.
And basically just using Thrasios' ability alongside cards, alongside Wilderness Reclamation and Awakening, something that managed to get
Yeah.
into those
Yeah. Yeah.
lists,
Yeah. Yeah. True.
which is a crazy card to be playing, but giving all your opponent's creatures vigilance when you're not really attacking isn't that bad, and letting them untap in their turn is sometimes bad, but if you're using the mana much better than they are, then yeah, pretty likely that it can be good.
You would probably not go for that anymore these days. We definitely had some wild brews back then, but that was the
Yeah,
way we enjoyed the format. Like, and it's also how we came in contact with the Timor deck that you talked about earlier. We had our very first international tournament in Prague back then, and our first successes. And at some point, you experimented with the Gracios Akiri deck, and you were very successful, and you were kind of at home with that deck. And that's something that we can definitely give away to, or like as an advice or a suggestion. Like, just be curious. You have to have fun, and it's if you like brewing decks, then just try out things and experiment with what Wizards is providing. We have a bunch of legends these days that people don't even touch. There is lots of playground to explore. And don't always look up things on MTG Top 8 and just play what's currently best performing and stuff. And
Yeah.
if that's what fulfills you, okay, go for that. But I think Magic overall has to offer so much more, and especially in this format, I think brewing is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I think a commander that brought back nostalgia for me was when I played Winter beginning of this year, because it's a bit similar to your loot pile. It combined so many old cards, like even in the experimental phase where I was trying things like Stinkweed Imp, for example. And I always thought Delirium is a super cool ability, but in Singleton it was kind of hard to make use of it. And also you had a couple of cards like Traverse the Ulvenwald and things like that that were played every now and then, maybe in Hogak and stuff like this. But there was never a relevant command zone that implemented that ability. And thanks to Winter, you could play cards like Sundering Titan. I don't like it. Back then, this was the go-to reanimation target. All of a sudden, people come up with, or like Wizards comes up with Archon of Cruelty and all these things, and then Sundering Titan was just vanishing, so to say. And now it was relevant that you brought two types to the graveyard again in order to make use of the delirium and stuff, and also things like
Yeah.
Patriot Imp and lots of cool cards that also go a bit back to the times where Asmo was still legal. Thought, or I still think Asmo was one of the most enjoyable decks because it was just super unique. Like
Yeah.
the Kreisen
And
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 Gaia and and the cards that you
yeah,
were playing
Asmo
were
Asmo is a card that explores a facet of Magic that doesn't see that much. There was that very unique Goblin lore deck that used to get played when Hollow One came out. Um, and these kinds of decks are super cool when they get found because they're using Magic cards that see no play anywhere else and have a very, very specific deck building requirements. And that's the kind of deck that Asmo was, and the like, kind of cards that Asmo got to play.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, and also like some combos that you would later on use in modern with the Daredevil and stuff. Like make an artifact, get the card back from graveyard and stuff like that. Just the design space for which this card was created was completely different back then in Kaladesh. No one would have expected to. A few sets later, or a few years later, there is a commander card that perfectly fits into the synergy of Asmo and the cookbook in
Yeah,
combination. It was really cool. Funny that you talk about a goblin. Now we have this new Mayhem goblin in the command zone. Some people try it in the command zone. I think Marcus is on it too. That in the beginning of your upkeep discards card and then you make a treasure token, which goes in an Asmo direction. It's definitely different deck because it's a difference between having Asmo turn 1, turn 2, or having your discard ability turn 4 earliest if it isn't for faithless looting and stuff. So it comes back in a light edition.
mm.
But yeah, maybe that leads us to another question, which are the decks you're looking for in the future? Are
Yeah.
there any?
I have. I'm very much focused on my current build, which is Terra, a list that I saw, I think, out of China initially, and I've seen some reanimator builds with it recently, and I really love the ability of having of you play 3 mana, you put a 4/2 in play, and maybe you draw a card from it, but you set up 5 cards in the graveyard. And there's a couple of cards in the format that really like that. So Sometimes you have a dork, and then you play your commander, and then you can next turn just cast a Hogak that you flipped. Sometimes you find an animate dead and an Archon, and sometimes you find an Overlord that you get to cast the next turn and then flicker with Flicker. So there's some really really cool lines in um, in the deck. It's pretty random as well. There are games that you just lose because you don't have your colors. You keep two lands and you're missing a color from the two lands that you kept, and you don't find any more lands, and you don't find your remaining colors, and then you're kind of screwed out of the game. But that's the cost that you get for. I play 31 lands in the deck because I have the land cyclers, and it's a very complex deck to construct, and I have a bunch of synergies in in and around, and I'm still switching out cards. I've played the deck for 3 FNMs now, and every time I'm like, okay, well, this card probably isn't it anymore. I can take this, but I really wanted to play this card. There was a situation where I wanted this card, so I'll add this card. So like I get to like a rare deck where I have a deck list and I'm trying it out and still switching a lot of cards around and trying to find the optimal list that I want to be playing. And then there's still a thought in the back of my head is that I want to give Matoya from Final Fantasy a try.
All right. Yeah.
That kind of got nerfed a bit through the banning of Force of Will, but there is still the potential for, with the card in play, to generate so much card advantage that getting to play cards like Foil and Commandeer and the rest of the remaining free spell, but getting to lean deeper into the free spell um, kind of rabbit hole, and the rest of the cards being cards that generate card advantage around that. That's still a deck list that I want to try and want to tune a bit and maybe show off on cam at some point, but I haven't had the time to get around to that. And there's also some very specific cards that go in that deck that I took a while to gather together and to find. So yeah, that's it basically.
I agree
In terms
that
of
the Terra is. I always like to have these decks that you. It takes a while to um say it takes a while to get behind those decks basically, and it's an interesting thought process along the way of playing the deck and tuning the deck and stuff, and it keeps you going. It's not like, okay, I have a finished list and I will just try it out.
absolutely, and the cool thing about the Terra list is that high rolling with the deck, being able to like it still has those classic, incredibly powerful reanimator lines of being able to flash an Ashen and exile 2 lands from the opponent,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
and then reanimate it the turn afterwards and exile a third land. Those lines also exist in the deck, and they're kind of what holds the whole thing together.
Mm. It's definitely very hard for your opponent to foresee what you're going to bring up match
Yep,
or like game by game, because the composition is so different and how the things come together, like the outcome can be completely different. We've played a couple of games already, and it's very interesting to play against the deck. For me, I would say, and we talked about this lately, I'm having a look at Lear. So my current deck is Tifa, with which I had a good run at the latest tournament in Strasbourg. Mm, but I'm having a look at the monocolored decks. I was playing Failure for some time. Then I was playing Azeroth, which also went well at the German event. Now I'm playing Tifa. This went great. Um, in terms of blue, I think Lear is a deck that looks interesting. I like the fact that you can finally play High Tide in a deck, like having a good High Tide deck. I also like the fact that we can still make use of Brain Freeze. What I do not like is that I expect this deck to be quite like not complicated to play in paper, but it's much more easy to play it in or on Modo. That's what I do right now to get behind the lines and stuff. But I think keeping track of all the things when you play the deck in paper is a bit more exhausting than when you have like your storm count being tracked and stuff like this. And you're doing lots of shuffling. This costs time and stuff like this. But I think it's an interesting one. And maybe we'll get our hands on a candelabra. Maybe we can borrow it from a friend. And even if not, you can play the deck without a candelabra. But I think that's an interesting one. And apart from that, if we're talking about a red deck, it's actually there's this Magda deck being played online, but I think that's rather an MTGO meme. It looks cool, but I think it's not doing that much outside of the MTGO environment. A red commander that I'm tinkering with for quite some time now, and I have a list that I constantly update, is actually Inti, because I think, and that goes back into the Asmo direction. I think this whole discard concept is interesting, and it got more and more support. We have the Pirate, right? The one drop that was played in standard. What's it called? Mako?
Marauding Mako.
Marauding Mako, right? We have things like this. Yeah, if you have like a somewhat decent density of one drops that you can play into Inti, making use of her trigger, and then a couple of supportive cards, Madness, Monument of Endurance, and stuff like this, I think you can bring up quite a cool pile. I would say it's not at a level at which I would bring it to a tournament yet, but maybe you will see it in a future video. And my third passion project is Yidris Living End, a deck that
Ooh,
we've
we haven't
played.
played that in a long time. We played it on cam at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah, that's right. I've updated it from time to time, gets more and more support. Especially, the big problem was always that since all the cascade spells are CMC3, you cannot really play something below that mana cost. But these days you have all these alternate casting costs, adventures, and blah blah blah. So it's much easier compared to 3 or 4 years ago to do something in the early turns. Of course, you can always use your first turn now to uh, search for the surveillant, which is definitely a very big upgrade for the deck overall, I would say. But yeah, that's something that I'm also tinkering with, and it's actually not too bad. Like your opponent is not set up against a graveyard strategy. You can definitely sneak some victories every now and then. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it from my side, I think, regarding those future decks.
It's always difficult because we have so many new cards coming out, and I think there was not that much in Spider-Man to be excited about. We tried to show off, in our opinion, the coolest commanders that were released.
At the point
And
at which we brewed the decks and did that, because you have to add to that by the time we recorded the showdown, those were the three coolest.
yeah,
Now you could have argued, okay, Lady Octopus seems cool. There's
I
also
think
the
the Hydro Man also seems like a
Hydro
pretty
Man
cool
leaks. All
potential
yeah, right,
pile.
right, right. Yeah.
So there's a couple more cards to kind of come from that set that people might try out, that even we might try out, but I think at this point it's probably more likely going to, if we see the deck have some success, we might pick it up to show it off on cam at some point.
Yeah.
Um,
There is nothing from which I would say, wow, super crazy. I mean, I like the Grixis guy. I will probably experiment a bit with this.
yeah, it's not
Um,
going to be a Modern Horizons 3 type set
no, no,
for
no, no, no.
Commanders, though.
And then it's also, and that's what like the professor I think said in the latest video, there is almost no emotion sold on this set, because I like the Marvel universe, and there are a couple of aspects that I really, really love about Marvel, but Spider-Man is like the Spider-Man universe is not part of those. This is usually, I know there are a lot of fans Spider-Man, and it's cool, but I'm personally not that much into it. So I also don't really have a connection to it. And
Yeah,
that's why I'm not really hyped about the set overall. So there are some new cards. Okay, cool. Some of them are good. I think the Spider-Man 2099 has potential, and maybe one or two more of the cards as a commander. But yeah,
and there's
that's
some
pretty much
cool
it.
artworks coming out. I like the Ponder. I like the Terminate.
That's right.
There's a couple of cool artwork reprints coming out.
Pimp
I really like
wise,
the Opposition Agent.
yeah. I'm not sure if I have seen the opposition agent. I have to check it later.
Yeah.
We have a couple of more, let's say, general questions. Some that I will just shortly answer to. But is all over again. Some people ask us if we will ever show ourselves in the gameplay videos. So having a face cam added. I think we both agree on the fact that in the gameplay videos, it's very unlikely that we will include some face cams because we don't have a studio yet, and as you've heard earlier, we do it in my apartment, um, and like you have to have two separate or two additional cameras. You have to sync everything. Like investment, the investment is very big. Timing, the time that you spend to set up everything is much more, and we both think that the gain actually not that big.
Yeah, and I think with our gameplay footage, we are very much trying to be focused on actually showing off the gameplay.
Yeah.
And in at least in my opinion, a lot of the videos that I've seen which do show face cam, they put a lot of editing. Um, they have to do a lot of editing, and it kind of it takes away from actually communicating what's going on, and it kind of happens in these like for me, when I see a video with face cams, I'm thinking, okay, this is more for the entertainment and more for people that are kind of casually watching. And I really like about our gameplay is that you can follow every line, you can see everything that's happening. We always communicate what's happening, and we make sure that if you're watching the gameplay, you can follow each play being made, and you're never missing any details because these are the nuances that we also want to communicate. We want to be like, okay, well, I'm fetching for this now because I need this mana combination, and like these kind of things that we comment on while it's happening. I also think that it's like our magic content is a bit more. I it's different. I don't like saying advanced, but it's a bit more on the intricacies of the gameplay as opposed to watching us for the fun of watching us. There's also some fun in watching us, I would say, but yeah,
I would say so. Yeah.
I think the
Uh,
the cameras would take away from that.
yeah, I think so too. I mean, I also think it would just be a distraction, maybe even for us, because you always have to think about The fact that when we're playing on cam, I've said that a couple of times. People, of course, we do make mistakes. We make many more mistakes compared to playing under a tournament cam, simply because we don't only play Magic. We're playing Magic for you guys. We try to entertain you, and we're explaining everything we're doing while we still have to think about the best lines or best possible lines. And sometimes, one of these parts is a bit exhausted, and then we don't think about tiny things and stuff. And then that's how some mistakes happen from time to time. Mm, but I think it would be more of a distraction for you and also for us. And it's also not worth the effort overall. And as you said, on our channel, you will always see, or that I always make the effort to show all the cards on the right side, like even a basic lens, and we always try to show the exact artwork so you know what's played right now, instead of having, like some lazy editing showing, assuming that you know most of the cards and just showing the necessary cards. No offense to anyone else. Other creators should do whatever they like. But I think it's not helpful for people to not show all the cards, especially when people are new to the format or like new to Magic overall. In order to understand the flow of the game, you need to know what's going on and what's currently happening. That's, yeah. Also, with the tournament content that we cast on, we try to do that. Sometimes it might be hard to follow. Mm, that's, by the way, a topic we could think about, that we in the future we might have a camera for like the casting sessions when we cast tournament content of ourselves or like streaming and stuff. I could see that. That would make sense, but not for the gameplay sessions. The other thing is, or one one question that also reached us was, how do you take all the time to moderate YouTube, Discord, etc.? Mm, in the beginning, it was obviously not that much. These days, it's a bit more. We have smart apps on our phone, so we can manage that on the go. Discord is also gaining more and more traffic, which, yeah, I'm very happy about that. That people found a base to discuss about their decks and the format overall, and like address some questions they have. For YouTube, I would say we're in the state that, or in which I'm not even answering all the questions these days, because under our videos, I try to establish a culture in which people are polite and like actually manage to answer a full question. And some of the viewers ignore that or they don't care about it whatsoever. So people don't really manage to write like a full sentence and stuff. I'm not taking the time to answer to those guys, but usually, like the people that know us, um, they will get their answers. And overall, I would say our community is really nice. Of course, there are a couple of black sheeps every now and then, but that's that's the internet. You can't get rid of that. But yeah, actually, I mean, it's not that much. I would say not yet. We're at 5,000 subscribers, not at 50,000. Maybe if we're at that point at some point, it will be much more overwhelming. But yeah, so far it's fine.
Yeah, you guys are usually nice to us as well.
Yeah.
We do make our mistakes, but that sometimes we don't even catch until the video is released. And mistakes happen, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
even like
that's
sometimes, like I mean, I agree that you and your Japanese cards is now the base meme here. The flare of Fortitude cast was definitely against Tifa. Should have definitely known what the card does. Sometimes I think we said that sometimes we just order the cards because they're cheaper in Japanese and they're just available, and so we just take them with us. But in the light of playing new decks with lots of new cards, not knowing the text, it's not always the most optimal case. That's for sure. Mm. And Flare of Fortitude is a card I thought I'm going to buy the cycle at some point because they might be relevant. And Thalia was a deck that doesn't feature Flare at all. Then again, Cloud seemed to be the deck that does that. And I was happy to play the card, but I only had like those indestructible hexproof things in mind and forgot about the second very relevant line, actually. But
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's maybe close the session with a question, another question, a final question, which goes in a direction of maybe introducing new players to the format.
Yeah, I think this is one of the questions that we could talk the longest on.
Yeah,
Um,
we have time.
I it's so the question worded as is any tips on what kind of mindset slash play pattern slash deck building you have for DC coming from other formats, EDH, Modern, Pauper, etc. So for the kind of first part, there are I'd say there's two modes for both of us. One is when we're playing on cam. Um, the we always try to play as well and as cleanly as possible. That doesn't matter if we're playing in a tournament or on cam. But the deck building part, we on cam, I think we are often trying to show decks that have cool things happening and that cool things are happening relevant to the commander that's being played. So I think something that we see in a lot of decks that do win tournaments is that the commander is often a card like there are a lot of decks that kind of play this sort of mid-range magic where the commander is a card that is good and that does affect the brewing a little bit, but isn't that relevant to the whole plan. Like when we, before the Rafine ban, and now with Aragorn, and with the Red Deck Wins decks, and he's a Yoshimaru a little bit more, but yeah, these kinds of cards. And what we are often trying to show is, as you could see in the Peter, in the Spider-Man lists, is that sometimes the decks that we're trying to show do something, have a theme, do a thing with the commander, kind of play around with that, and we also realize that sometimes the plan that you go for with those commanders is a little bit too cute in a format where a lot of the decks that you face will have 3 removal spells, and they're all going to hit your commander if you are just trying to get them out all the time. And, like, for example, Tanuk deck. That is a deck that I wouldn't bring to a tournament, but that should and could exist in our format. And that's why we decided to show it as well. So there's a bit of a different attitude in specifically the two of us towards playing Dual Commander as a tournament format and playing it for cam. And coming from other formats, my kind of opinions around that is there's also two styles. There's the EDH crowd that comes from a 4-player, very casual sort of environment. Even if you're playing CDH, you're also in a CDH atmosphere is also very different because you have this kind of politicking that's always an aspect and that can decide a game on a whim. When you're
Yeah.
playing 1v1, the opponent is never going to be like, this might kill you, but I'll let you do it.
Mm.
Or, no, this might kill me, but I'll let you do it. Or, you might win if I spell, but let's see what happens. These kind of things, those decisions are never going to be made in a 1v1 format, and they're a mistake. So that kind of decision making needs to go away in your head if you are coming from a multiplayer format and coming to a 1v1 format. So you're thinking you're always you're trying you're looking at a board state and you're thinking, okay, how do I navigate through this board state to win the game for me? And um, also, in any downtime that there is, if the opponent is making a decision, you should also be making decisions. You should be thinking about what the opponent is doing, what they could be thinking about, all these sorts of things that are a core aspect to playing a game. I I would say competitively against one another. Um, they need to come into your decision making, and modern and pauper as formats, I'd think that legacy and vintage and all the other formats kind of fit into that category as well. Coming from there, I think a switch that happens from those kinds of formats that can take a while to get used to is that you have less consistency. So you need to be thinking about the cards in your deck as I won't always have this, but I need specific situations. But like I'll sometimes have this, and the card needs to be good when you sometimes. So playing something like a Veil of Summer thing to be doing, you don't really have a sideboard, so all your cards probably should be good in the main board. That would be like my 2 cents to the for this question. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think I would add to that. So what I often witness currently, we only have like a dual commander FNM, and only people that are already in contact with dual commander also join that FNM. Back then, we had like a mixed multiplayer and dual commander get together with the players. And then there were like some people from EDH having a look into dual commander. They were interested in that format. And what I often experienced was that people have very limited levels of, or like very limited rates of frustration. You know, if you start with a competitive format, you basically, especially if you're coming from multiplayer, basically you have to learn everything from the beginning because Magic overall is a very complex game. And as you already said, as things are handled in multiplayer, it's not how they're handled in Magic usually. And also, multiplayer has the potential to bear lots of very, like rules wise, very complex sequences, but players usually don't play that out. Either it's like, okay, we just don't we don't check up check out like how this actually works, or let's just do it this and that way and we just agree on how it happens, you know. This is how most people on kitchen tables get into contact with more complex sequences, while in competitive Magic it's like super relevant to know how things stack up and interact with each other in order to make the best decisions for yourself and make the best plays. And that's why I often witness people not having like the necessary frustration uh, level in order to withstand to a point at which they actually make progress. Because what you often witness is like they start with dual commander, they play it for a couple of games, like they will maybe play a couple of FNMs, maybe even some small tournaments and stuff, and they will always end up with an unsuccessful day, lots of matches lost, also because they might not draw the right conclusions off of their games. I remember we had like one player back then in the community. and I really thought he had like one of the best mindsets. Who was because of because for budget reasons he was playing like a Simic Merfolk deck with this one guy from the Ixalan set, if you remember, and he was constantly smashed, really constantly smashed. He had more or less no success with the deck. But at the end of the day, he always came up to me and he said, "Today, I learned a couple of new things. I'm happy about that. I will come back next week." And he did that for half a year. And at some point, you really saw the learning curve that he started to do things better, making better decisions. And yeah, I think this is the biggest thing that I can teach people, if you so will. Like, you really you have to have the will to is there like a synonym for in den sauren Apfel beißen in English? Is it also
I would say just you have to stick to it,
yeah, yeah, probably. I
and
mean, because
yeah, I'm not.
that's something that if you're coming from modern or pauper or any other 60 card format, that those people are usually engaged that way, or like introduced, um, they know how competitive Magic works. You don't have to explain it to them. But the biggest gap is usually with people coming from EDH, I would say. And also, then again, for the people that coming from the 60 cards formats, um, sometimes you see them having problems if it's the first time being in contact with a singleton format. They sometimes don't really understand like the difference in variety in the singleton format. Like, there are these situations where like, oh, you had this card again, or I don't ever draw this and whatsoever. Yeah, well, it's like 1 in 100 compared to 4 in 60. The maths are just different. Might be a bit of an advanced topic, and you will get there at some point, but it's definitely something that you have to have in mind when you're coming from a competitive format and you're already into Magic, and you want to have a look at a single format. I've experienced that a couple of times already, and yeah, that's that. I mean, as you said, we could probably write a book about that because it's like a very, very big topic.
Yeah,
Mm, always good to have someone who, if you're really at the beginner's level, I would say it's always good if you have someone who can kind of mentor you in some things, like, or in some ways, someone to ask questions to, someone that you can learn from playing against, and also like even learn from just watching them playing. That's definitely something that will help you.
yeah,
Mm,
and I think something. I mean, this would be a um, just a small another thing is don't take back your mistakes. If you make a mistake, stick to it and kind of drill it into your brain that you've made a mistake in this situation, and that the next time you are looking at that mistake or you're looking at something like that happening, you think back and I screwed up last time and I can do it better this time. So try to think about the things that happen in your games and think about how you can improve them next time. If you lose a game, think back to how you navigated that game, and if there was a line that you could have taken that would have won you the game. Because when you're in that situation the next time, you might be able to draw a learning and have a have a line that you could take and see that line next time and take it and actually win the game.
I would even say it's not because you said it's a small thing. I would say it's a very, very big thing. Because I recently in a tournament I had this very situation against playing with Tifa against a Deadpool player, and the Deadpool player did not know that a dried arbor actually has no text box. So he decided to change the text box with the dried arbor, uh, using his Deadpool. And later on, he was like, "Yeah, well, if I would have known that, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Yeah, but this is the exact moment that it needed for you to remember that this exact change is not working the way it was intended." You know, I mean, Deadpool might be a bad example because it has lots of rules questions and it interacts very weirdly with some cards. But those situations are sometimes needed in order for you to remember them the next time they're necessary. Like, I think all of us had like those tournament situations where things happened. I remember once where I was like, had a win and in game with big fingers, and I think I had a Trazyn in my graveyard already. I was just searching for a creature to sacrifice to Necromancy. And for some reason, I was kind of blind that my living death, because I was always casting death, I could have reanimated my lands to Saprolings with the
You mean
living
life death,
life death,
not
sorry,
living death, yeah.
not living
But
death.
yeah,
Yeah, life.
I
I could have just cast that spell, but I was kind of blind because to me it was just one side of the card, you know? And afterwards, someone said, "Yeah, well, you could have cast that." I was like, "Jesus Christ, that's so dumb." But that was, I will never forget that. And you know, those are some things you just learn from it. And even if you do it in casual play, as Samuel said, don't take it back. Just always take it as a learning. But you have to learn from it. Don't repeat a mistake several times. Think about it next time. Yeah, we're getting into lots of details here, and I think we've already talked quite a bit about all those questions.
yeah.
For my part, thank you very much. If you made it to this last chapter, thanks again for supporting us in this project. Thanks to you, we reached this milestone, and it's, yeah, as I said, it's a
Yeah,
blast.
and it's always good to remember we keep going because people are watching, and
Absolutely.
as long as people are watching, we'll probably keep going, and we have a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, we always we chat about kind of how rewarding it is actually to be doing it, and how fun and at a tournament when you look in the comment section and someone's like, "Oh, awesome play there," or "Very cool this," and these kind of things, they're the reasons why we keep going. And it's that's for us. It's like for me, it's probably different. Yeah, it's definitely the most fun way that I engage with is doing stuff for Cam. And like I think the my highlight tournament experience of this year so far. There might be more to come, but I mean, so far, definitely was playing loot for the members on Cam. And like, I think it wouldn't have been as great if I hadn't been able to look back at all the games and kind of bask in the glory of going 5-2 with this pretty irrelevant commander again. Um,
Yeah, I get
and
that.
yeah, like just kind of being able to look back at the all the magic that we've played is is so fun, and you guys make it possible. And yeah, thanks for being there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy if you have a look at only the Moxfield library, how many decks we've put together within the couple of years, right? It's crazy.
Absolutely.
And we will keep on finishing the Spider-Man showdown within the next weeks, I think. And we have another focus session planned already to get back to the usual content. There will be a ban update soon, and we also have some tournament content again, so many more things to come. But I think with that we can say goodbye for now, at least, and see you
Yeah, I
in
think we can. Yeah,
another
see
video.
see you next time, as
Yeah,
we always
as we
say.
always say. Thanks for tuning in. Ahoy.
See you next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.